Yeah, just wear the beanie. That's it.
That's pretty solid. I feel good about that. That's a good way to start this. Get the attitude up high, you know.
Good trade 2 J's if you could become Wolverine.
Where are you getting all this information?
I definitely heard some rumors about it. Are you still going? I get goosebumps thinking about it because it's like you can hear them get.
The car, I was going to qualify and I was going to drive that down the racetrack.
Just threw the hood over the ditch and
Longest employee of Knox.
You did some digging there, huh?
Look, a bunch of you use this code all 2023. Let's keep that train rolling. So if you are looking for some awesome FD apparel, different stuff, you know, things to buy, maybe it's not for you, maybe it's for somebody else, might as well save a couple of dollars. So when you're on shopfd.com, use podcast24, just the, podcast numbers, podcast 24 at checkout, save yourself 20%. And if you do, let me know. Just if you see me in person, give me a high five, say, hey, thanks for saving 20%. Maybe online, shoot me just shoot a note. You know where to find me. Links are in the description, all that stuff. If you feel like stalking me or just letting me know that you save some money. So shopfd.com, podcast 24, save yourself some money. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Outerzone, the official podcast of Formula Drift. My name is Jacob Gettins, and we have, I think, somebody who's held more positions in FD than anybody else. Chris Uhl, who is grid worker, judge, obviously, and then now kind of running the show behind the scenes.
Yeah.
You seem very enthused about that.
It's one of those jobs I always thought I would have. Mm-hmm. So I never thought I'd be a judge ever. So to get to the position that if I thought I stuck around long enough, I'd get there eventually. And so here I am now, and I think it's going well.
I think so. I mean, it's a weird job. So what is your official role now? What is the title?
So it's called race control.
Okay.
So then I manage everything on track, the sending of the cars, the practice, counting laps for pro, managing the safety aspect of the racetrack. And then there's some rule book stuff I'm involved in,
Okay.
Rules committee stuff. I talk to Kevin a lot with, upcoming stuff or making clarification about things, post weekend and for the coming year.
Yeah. It's definitely the race control aspect of it, I think, is one, more crucial than most people know. Two, way more hectic. You've got, obviously the different track workers, which there's 6, 7, 8 people depending.
Right.
And then you've also got production in your ear going this is when we're going to go to break. So you're dealing with that. And then on top of that, it could be a spotter that's trying to get a hold of you. Sage is trying to get a hold of you. I'm yelling at you. You've got all of these different people. And at the end of the day, it's your job to make sure that cars are getting off the line and the show is at a pace, I think is probably the best way to put it.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, that's why I like it. Because the judging thing, you're sitting around a lot, you're watching. I like to watch practice, but you're just waiting. Mm. And with race control, you're doing something. There's always something to do. There's probably 3 things to do. Mm-hmm. So I like the distraction of it. There's no time for anything else.
Yeah. If there's cars on track, you have to be doing something.
Right.
And then even before that, in some of the meetings and stuff you're a part of, and that those weekends can be so weird with the gaps in them that if you're not constantly doing something, you kind of lose your mind.
Yeah, for sure. And, even when we have breaks, sometimes that doesn't happen because a driver's upset or, a spotter needs clarification on something or, we might not even go to lunch myself.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's I don't know, that whole area, where the spotters and production and race control is, I do wish we could kind of live stream that. I know we definitely couldn't because there's a lot of interesting conversations that can never be public, but it's so chaotic, but in a very fun way. Because there's a ton of camaraderie that's going on too.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and there's this aspect of, being a spectator or being a fan of Formula Drift and drifting in general. And then you get to be in on all these conversations. And, not only are you listening, but you have input that matters. And, from being a drift nerd myself, I think that's the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
How can it get better than that? You know,
you and I really share that one thing, that we're massive nerds of the sport that happen to get a job in the sport. And
yeah,
like, that's not taking away from anybody else that's been around it. But I think you and I both watched it from the sidelines for many years and then slowly crept in. And then now it's like, we're in these positions where like, how the hell did we get here?
for sure. I mean, I had my buddies at my house watching FD, you know, and, you know, I myself would comment on Facebook, be like, that was a terrible call, blah, 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 blah. Which, when I became a judge, I went back and erased that stuff. I was like, I should probably get rid of that. But yeah, to then, you know, to watching online, to going to events and seeing Sage and being like, you know, whack my girlfriend at the time, be like, that's Ryan Sage. He's a co-founder. And now it's like, I talk to him all the time. Like, what path is that?
Yeah, it's got to be. I mean, I'm speaking from the same experience. Like, it's got to be a trip. I mean, you know, there's a really interesting post that I found on your Instagram of you like working on your S13. It was 2012, and you've got FD on the screen. You're like working on the car. And you're like, like check it out. Like FD's on. Like what a great time. And then fast forward 2-3 years, and you're on the other side of that screen.
Yeah. I think I met Pat Gentili, which was previous race control, in probably 2012 through like grassroots drifting. And I found out who he was, and I was like, because I think he did grid at the time. Mm-hmm. And I was like, dude, I want to do that. Like, how do I do that? He's like, you know, just volunteer. So I think in 2014, I volunteered in Seattle, and then I flew myself to Irwindale and Atlanta and slept on the floor in his hotel room. And it just happened that someone left and moved on, and then there was a spot. And, you know, I can remember it was in Seattle in 2015, I think. Kevin Wells gave me my 511 button-up staff shirt, and I was like, you know, it's in the cellophane stuff, and you're like, this is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, it's neat, the like moment when you figure it out. Like, I mean, I got a tattoo of Utah just because like that was my first time on mic, and like I just remember getting the call from Sage, same thing, just being like, hey, we need you to fill in for Jared. And I'm like, oh, what? Like, you sure? And he's like, yeah. No, he's like, you've got announcing experience. I know you can do it. And I'm like, okay. And then, yeah, same thing. And then it's just next thing you know, you're like, oh, I'm doing this thing now.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. A trip.
Yeah. So then like going from chasing cones, sleeping on the floor to, you know, then working grid, which is honestly my favorite job ever, because, you know, you interface with race control, but it's kind of on you to do all the things, you know, rustle up the cars and run the show in a timely manner. And I really like that. Like, car's on fire and you sprint across the burnout box with the car doing burnouts and, you know, try not to die and put out fires is freaking awesome. I just, that was my high point in Formula D, I think, you know, and as you move up comes more responsibility, and it's not quite the same because.
Well, I mean, you got to see drivers in one of the most like vulnerable positions, right? Like the moment before they're about to take off, like you are literally staring into the eyes of every driver they're the most scared, right? Like, I'm sure you've seen drivers who are both crazy intense and then both like about to shit a brick, right?
Yeah. Some dudes are just like vibing. Some dudes are just robot, like Osbo.
Yeah.
It's like a switch. Ahead. Yeah. Forsberg, I don't think he ever looked at me once. I'd just point him in and he'd go. Thought Forsberg probably hated me forever just because he's so locked in. Yeah. And then, you know, I think one of my favorite guys on grid was Matt Kaufman. Because, you know, you give him a fist bump once and he wants that fist bump every single time. And I love that guy. He's actually the only person who's hit me in the burnout box.
Really?
Yeah. I was at Irwindale and I was on the inside of him on the bank, which was kind of dumb. And if you point Kaufman in the burnout box, he in gear, rev, dump clutch, and it just, you know, walked down and kissed me a little bit. And he was freaked out. I just thought it was hilarious because, you know, But
He always had a really interesting burnout routine too, where he would do that like big light up, and then he'd do his scrub ins, and then would usually leave the box with one more.
Yeah. He's a maniac. He would just slay in practice.
Mm-hmm.
And, he just didn't have the luck or whatever. Like some guys, they have this barrier that they can't get past for whatever reason. And you really feel for those guys because you interact with them so much on grid, and you see it in their face and you see it in their body language. And like, that's why I love underdogs so much, because you see them cross that plane. Like you get to FD, it's super hard. And, you get through pro spec, and then you go to pro, and it's like, this is so hard. This is so hard. It's so much harder than that step. So much harder than, pro-am. And to see them like work through that and get better and get the win and get a top 16, and then they get to 8, and you can just see it in their face. It's like the coolest thing. It gives me goosebumps just talking about it.
Mm. There's these interesting moments where something happens and it kind of like it breaks them in the best way, where then you see the progression happen, right? Like sometimes it's a big accident, sometimes it's a big win, sometimes like a car setup change, like you hear them like, oh, I brought on a suspension tech, they changed one thing, and then you just watch them just decimate.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is the underdog story is, I mean, it's the coolest. Like nobody wants to watch the same driver win over and over again, right? Like you want some guy that shouldn't be winning come in and take somebody out that they had no right to, and then it's like, oh, this is it.
Right. Even with like an underdog goes like OMT's Osbo or something, and like they're so stoked that they presented themselves properly to earn it one more time. It's like almost a win for their program and their self and their driving. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, that barrier to like that, the level of success just keeps going up over and over again, right? So it's like, it could just be like getting a one more time against a legend. I can't remember who it was, but like them one more timing with James Dean. And just, I remember the driver being so pumped. And like, I might've been like Robert Thorne. No, he beat James Dean in St. Louis, I think. And he's just like, oh my God, like I just did that thing. And I'm like, yeah, dude, like you're a great driver. Yes, you did the thing. But then then it's like, now I need to be in top 8. Now I need to be top 4. Now I need to win an event or podium. And then I don't know how they keep the motivation going after winning like several championships like that.
Right.
It just boggles my mind.
Right. Well, the idea, I mean, if you don't think you're capable of winning, then you shouldn't be there, right?
Yeah.
But the idea of I have to win and anything less than that is failure. That has to be so much pressure. And like, how do you deal with that and go through the weekend,
I struggle to find it because I'm competitive for sure, but not to that degree. And it was taking time working with drivers where I realized I'm like, oh, I'll never get to this point. It doesn't matter how hard I try or how good I get. There's something in my brain that is different than theirs. Mm-hmm. There's something in their brain where like, it doesn't matter. I am the best. You can't question me on it. And they all have that, which is so weird.
Yeah. I'm a knucklehead, like caveman when it comes to competition. Like there's a switch in my brain that I can't turn off. And I decided really early on that in grassroots drifting, I was like, I can't do competitive stuff because this one thing happened. I was like, I'm done.
Yeah. I don't know what it is, but I definitely have that where I knew really early on that I was never going to get to that level. And I'm also just not that great of a driver. Like I'm decent, but like, I don't know. It's hard when you start hanging out with those guys and you just see how effortless they make it look at that level. And you're like, how could I ever get to that point?
They're so good. I think we're in St. Louis and I was up on the roof with Steph Papadakis and we were talking about line during Spotter's Help. And he's like, well, what if Osbo does this? And it like changes how he drives. So I'm like, yeah, do that. So he radios Osbo and he did exactly that. And I'm like, that's insane.
Yeah. And especially considering just how these cars are developed, how grippy they are, how fast the lap is. Like, the fact that they can just think, oh, I need to initiate, a 10th sooner, and that's going to change my line here. But they can do that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
It's wild. Absolutely wild. So
the precision that they provide and the show that they produce with a maximum of 12 laps before the seating bracket is wild. Like,
Yeah.
It's so impressive and so understated. I don't think, how many people understand how hard it is to pull up to, unless you're incredibly good, obviously, but you pull up to a racetrack and you're like, all right, how many laps is it going to take me to figure out what flows in the line? I don't know, 10 before you feel like you're getting there. And these guys are doing it in 1,000 horsepower rocket ships with insane levels of grip that are incredibly hard to drive.
And they have to be perfect within 12 laps. Like the max you're going to get is 12 laps. I think that's important to push on too. Like,
right.
And I mean, realistically, you would know just taking account, like, what do you think the average is for laps? Like, they can get 12, but what do you think they're actually getting in most cases?
I think the average for Long Beach was 9, 10.
Yeah.
And then in Atlanta, it rained, so it was worse. So the highest lap anybody got was Odie at 9. And I think the average was like 5 or 6 because of that session was totally obliterated by rain.
Well, and then you have to understand too that like it's actually super rare that you're practicing in the same conditions you're going to compete in, right?
100%.
Whether it's temperature, time of day, moisture levels, whatever. Like it's super rare that you're actually going to put down laps in the same place and same time that you're going to compete in.
I mean, you go from top 32 in Atlanta in the hot sun to top 16 in the dark, and you can just see the cars come up short at Interclip 1 because they can't reach out that far because the track is so much tighter.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so, you hear about it in so many other forms of racing, but it applies so much in drifting, and I don't think people realize it, that like, a 15, 20 degree drop in temperature on the track is night and day difference in the way the car is going to perform. Just the side bite alone, like that car's going to dig in so much harder. And if you don't know how to adjust the tire pressure or even to the extreme, like the actual suspension setup, that's it. You're going to come up short or vice versa. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And that comes to like the experience of the teams, I'd love to just be a team member on an RTR or like NOSBO or something and just watch them adjust the cars and just go through a weekend. I think it'd be fun.
Just to know what it is that they're actually changing, right? Like I've been a part of a few, but like not ever at that level of like a championship winning team. And I know the adjustments that happen at smaller level teams, but I'm always curious when you get to that level, like how much are they actually playing with the car? Is it a lot? Is it not at all? Is it just the driver?
Right.
Like I don't actually know. And it's so hard to get that info.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's kind of fun being with Kevin and Trey. They're from a rule standpoint, they're trying to get out in front of things, whatever it may be. So, they're always trying to stay on top of the cars and the technology as it advances. So it's fun to be privy to those conversations. I honestly wish I had Trey's job just to hang out with Kevin all day because, Kevin's super funny and when you're tired and delirious and it's basically summer camp for us knuckleheads on the racetrack and it's a super good time.
I will say that it wasn't until Atlanta that I've actually hung out with Trey. He might be the funniest human being I've ever spoken to.
I'm like,
it is
bro,
wild how funny he is.
Start a TikTok or something, right? You need to monetize because you're hilarious.
And he's so flat with his delivery, but it's so pointed and perfect.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're like, how did you think of that? And then he's not even cracking a smile because it's like he's already over and he's on to the next joke.
I honestly think he keeps Kevin sane because, we give Kevin shit all the time because he'll be, thinking about 100 things and he's in the golf cart just driving in circles, trying to get his mind right, because there's like 1,000 things happening.
So I honestly, like, I kind of struggled trying to figure out like where I fit in with the Formula Drift group, right? Because I'm like in this weird spot, right? Well, here's the thing, like you kind of you've flipped through a bunch of groups, right? So you can kind of hang out with the judges, you can kind of hang out with production in a way, like, there's these little, I wouldn't say cliques because everybody's really friendly. Like it's not like there's any warring sides, but like
no.
After hanging out with you guys in Atlanta a little bit more, I'm like, shit, like I kind of want this to be my people. Because like So much fun.
It is fun.
Yeah,
I
gotta figure out how to
really-
get into the Formula Jams, group chat though. Like that seems to be where it's at.
There's some bangers in there for sure. I one of the things I wanted to like make sure happened, as race control was to get us doing that again, because the schedule got so condensed, and I didn't feel like I could hang out with the dudes as a judge and like have a couple beers, because I didn't want the perception of what that could affect me in competition. So I had to kind of like go to bed or distance myself and try to make sure that my mind was right so I could do the best job, because that's what the competitors deserve. But I definitely missed that. And as race control now, I'm hanging out with the boys and we're having fun, because we work 12 hours a day, maybe more sometimes. And it's like, we need to talk shit and make fun of each other and laugh.
Well, and it's a really high stress environment. Like you get that gallows humor, right? Like anybody who's been through a really stressful situation or workplace, like, I go back to kitchens, like some of the funniest conversations I've ever had are Friday night, 9 p.m., restaurant's full, there's a line out the door. You have no idea how you're going to get it all done. But for some reason you're smiling because you're so screwed that you're like, there's nothing else we can do but laugh.
Yeah.
And that's the track situation is kind of similar, because it's like you're in danger. You're in very dangerous situations constantly. You're responsible for the life and safety of the fans, the drivers, everybody else. And you kind of have to keep it lighthearted so you don't delve into how crazy of a situation this whole thing is.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, the idea, so we go to some very high level racetracks.
Yes.
From production standpoint, and we go some maybe not quite as high racetracks. So our track staff, Formula D's track staff, is always the first one there when there's an incident. Ricky put out Odie's fire by himself, and he's got like, I'm pretty sure he has like fake hips and stuff. He's there because he loves it, and he's the guy that gets there first and puts that fire out. Like, it's always the track staff that's there. And sometimes we butt heads with the tracks staff. But I mean, these guys travel to every round and they know the drivers and the drivers trust them. And it's like, they, like I said, are the first ones there. Drivers trust them. They deserve to handle that situation because they're good at it.
Yeah. Well, and there's just such an emotional attachment, right? Like there is that inherent trust between the drivers and the staff, and you're connected to each of the drivers. Like everybody, you have some sort of moment of like, hey, remember that time, right? You can do that with almost every driver. So when you see them in danger, like a James Dean or an Odie, we got a crazy record of fires already this year. We should knock on wood, Orlando, but. Yeah, it's you have that commitment to them where their families, their crew, what they went through just to get to this event. So when you see something like that pop off, you're like, holy shit. There's almost like that dad strength, right? Which I don't know if you've unlocked a dad strength moment yet, but there's something to it where it's untapped potential.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's weird. That's weird.
Yeah, I mean, we spend so much time together traveling. Most of us are from the Northwest, so we're on the same plane, same rental car. Michael Weber, I met him in I think it was freshman year in high school.
Damn.
Like, he was in my wedding, I was in his, and he's now come to FD with me, and we get to share that together as well. It's like, I don't know, it's like the best scenario I can imagine.
Yeah, you guys. Yeah, I forgot how long you guys have been like friends. Like that's kind of a cool scenario to have somebody that you share that connection with, right? Like somebody that you have driven around in a Z24 Cavalier with, and
first car right there.
Damn, that's a sick first car. I mean, people underestimate
awesome.
how awesome those cars were.
I had a Flowmaster put on that thing, dude.
Damn,
she was annoying in high school, and it's a good time.
Nothing. Yeah, nothing cooler than showing up to the PBI J&M youth group with a Cavalier, right?
Yeah, that goes way back.
I mean, hey, I gotta do some digging. So, but yeah, I think that's kind of neat that you guys got to share that through the years too, and then now you get to continue to work together. Michael's super cool. I mean, there's really nobody on the FD staff that I don't get along with, but him and I getting to talk hockey is like. That's like instant connection. As soon as we get into hockey, it's funny. You can see everybody else like kind of look like, here they go, and I'm like
tuning out. No, Michael's one of those guys where you'll go anywhere. If you go to some public event, he'll know like 5 people there, and you're like, bro, stop talking. Like, God, yeah. How do you know all these people?
Yeah, super friendly. So how far back does your drifting career go?
I think I got my first 240 in like 07-ish.
Okay.
And I was street driving it and I did a burnout and there was a cop behind me and I got really scared. And for some reason, no plates, like it's the dumbest thing ever. He let me go and I sold the car because I was so worried because I work for Chrysler. I work on cars for a living. So the idea of me losing my license or something, that can't happen. I have to drive cars. So
you're gonna be able to test drive, yeah.
So I got scared and I sold that car. And then a year or two later, maybe, I bought an S13 hatch with an S14 SR from Walker Wilkerson, which is like a big throwback thing. And I started drifting I did it like a teaching day, a school day at Evergreen Speedway. And then we would go to PGP, which like XDC did an event there.
Yep.
And we would drive on Wednesdays and whenever the weekend event was. So sometimes we were driving like 2 or 3 times a month with my buddy Joe Lynn, who was a pro spec driver for a year, the COVID year. And looking back, I don't know how I pulled that off. I didn't have any money back then. Like it was like a tank of fuel in the truck to go down there, a tank of fuel for the drift car, and then, used tires. I'm like, how did I do that? And,
just make it work.
Yeah, it progressed. And, we would drive team tandem with my buddy Lucas and Tom and Joe. And that was super fun. It's just like, one of the best things I ever did was put a stereo in the drift car. So then, because you're waiting, drifting is waiting, know. So
it's a good way of putting it.
It is.
It is a lot of waiting.
It's got a sub in there and some speakers, whatever. And then you can just kind of vibe and like set the tone. And to me, that's what drifting is. It's like this, you feel locked in and you like make a sick lap and you're just stoked about it. And, when you do that with your buddies, like some of your best friends, and you go out and like win a team tandem comp or whatever, and maybe not even win, just you do well. And for like, nothing beats that. And yesterday I got to drive with most of them for the first time in 2 years because I lost a motor and had my son and like all these things like life gets in the way, as you get older. I'm sure you know how that works.
Oh yeah.
But we went down to Spirit Peaks and it was raining and it was pretty terrible. And I was kind of driving like a knucklehead because I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm, pulling the e-brake way too much. And then it finally dried out. And then, you throw out some laps that you're proud of. And it's like coming off the racetrack and you're like sweaty and you want to just rip your helmet off. But that feeling and that vibe, if you will, there's nothing better than that. I've done drag racing. I've done, lapping days. I had an Evo that I would do lapping days. And that was fun. Drag racing was not fun. And then you discover drifting and you're like, this is the best thing ever. I'm going to do this. I have to do this. I saw it at Evergreen Speedway one night. And I'm like, I have to do this. So
that calling is so weird because like I've spoken to so many people, obviously just about drifting in general, but almost all of them have that same sentiment of like something happened, they saw it, they witnessed it, or they were a part of it. And then it clicked and like, I need to do this thing. Like there's something about it that is just, it's indescribable. Like you're making a car do something it should never have done. You're balancing on a knife edge all the time. And then you have the ability to do that next to you and with people you either know really well or not at all. And for some reason, it builds such a weird community too.
It is. Yeah, there's nothing in motorsports. I don't think there's anything quite like drifting where people are so open and willing to help you. You know?
Yeah.
It's really interesting, particularly overseas, because they have like less rules or whatever. But they're like, "Oh, your car broke? Take mine. Go drive it. Go drive my car in comp." You know, whatever.
Yeah.
Like that's drifting. That you're not gonna get that in circuit racing or anything. You know.
Yeah. There's. It's almost like everybody in drifting wants to win on their own merit. Like the technicality of winning because somebody else broke is almost like disrespectful. Where, you know, like I've even heard guys who have won events, even at the pro level, and they're like, yeah, but, you know, this happened and that happened, and then that's why I won. And they're like disappointed that they won that way. And it's not often that you hear that in any other form of competition where somebody, you know, is genuinely disappointed because they won, you know, because of a scenario, not because of their own merit.
Right.
It's like, yeah, I got the win. Like I still finished. Like they all broke down. Like we got a better car. Very rarely do you hear that in drifting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's. I'm glad we don't have protests anymore, because it was getting out of hand, and it was, you know, the word I always use is kind of gross. Like you get these protests and be like, bro, come on, you want to. I know, like, what you're saying is technically true, but like, really, is that where we've gone? And I don't know. I guess that's progression and that's motorsports. But
I get it. I get it in some regards. Like I very much try to stay neutral on everything. Right. Mm-hmm. It's tough because I mean, I definitely have my own thoughts and opinions, but I want to, whenever I'm discussing drifting or announcing, to try and see so many different levels of it. And on the protesting, like I do see both sides, because I was in the booth during some very lengthy arguments between spotters and, you know, judges and everybody else. And then where it's like, why are you still doing this? Like the decision was made. All you're doing now is upsetting people. Right. Let's move on. Right. And I've also seen times where something wasn't protested almost out of pride, where I'm like, you could have protested this thing and won, but you didn't do it just because you didn't want to be known of somebody who does that. Yeah. So it's tough.
Probably half the drivers I would say are, I don't protest. I don't do that.
Yeah.
But you know, as a judge, the idea of having a protest available to fix something that I messed up, I like that. Because if I'm wrong, I want to correct it. Mm-hmm. And maybe I missed something or, you know, whatever. If I am wrong, please fix it. Because I don't want to be wrong. That's not why I'm here. Mm. Judging is hard, man.
Dude, you and I had a lot of discussions last year about it, because it was kind of difficult to watch you go through the process. I think you cared so much about the drivers. It was tough. You expressed to me, and if you want to get into it, you can, but like you expressed to me like a moment where a driver you very much respected got upset with you, and like it kind of broke you, to be on, like from the outside. Like I could see it where you're just like, what the fuck am I doing here? Right.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like to have a driver that you enjoy watching, like one of, you know, a guy that does all the things you want out of drifting, right? And then to have a call made that is questionable, or, you know, you could argue to the end of time either direction, right? And then to see the frustration in that driver, And it's probably, it's not just this is the straw, right? And it's all
Right.
these other things, but the driver's been holding on to these things the whole time. And you're just trying to do the best you can and respect the effort that they put in because it's so hard. And there was an event in where was that? It was a one-time event up above New York, Erie. It was Erie.
Yeah, Erie,
And there
Pennsylvania.
was a call that I made, and like 5 minutes later, I knew I was wrong. And it like destroyed me a little bit because I don't, just my personality in general is I'm a rule follower and I want to do the right thing. And, to make the call and then know that I'm wrong immediately is the worst thing ever. There's nothing I can do about it. And, the driver protested, or I think after the event, and he was right, and I myself was wrong along with whoever voted what.
Yeah.
And, the driver got points for the round, but it's like, I'm a mechanic by trade, so I like tools. But if the tool doesn't do its one job, I hate that tool. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like you have one job. And in this case, the one job is judging, which is very loaded and, not that simple. But you have this one job and you need to execute it 100% of the time, which is virtually impossible because these cars are so gripped up and they're so on edge that the drivers, they are incredible in what they do, but they're so close to being undrivable. And what happens is these two guys, in my opinion, grip their cars up to the moon and they go out and make a mistake and run into each other. And now two cars are broken and I'm supposed to decide what happened. And I have 3.5 minutes to figure that out. And
If
two
that.
replays. Yeah,
Right?
I mean, that's generous, right?
Yeah.
So you get a couple replays and it's like, I tried to go with what I felt live.
Right.
Because you get into these replays and it's in slow motion and it's like you're watching it, but it's almost out of context. So I try to just go with what my gut said live. And most of the time I was right if I did that. And
Is that,
go ahead.
was that like your process of like, okay, watch the run live, get a gut feeling, and then either try and, supplement that decision with the replay or reject it, and then at that point make the call?
Yeah, 100%. I watch it live. I'm kind of old school in that I would take notes, like big things, particularly if a driver made a good adjustment in chase or something because of a mistake in the lead. I would note that. I would value that highly. And then just try to confirm something big that I thought I saw in a replay and then just do my decision. And because you can almost like psych yourself out if you're like, well, this or that, or if this, then that. And you just get lost in this endless cycle. And then it's like, one more time. I don't know.
Yeah.
So if you're going to talk yourself in and out of things for more than 30 seconds, it's probably a one more time.
I think that's a good way of putting it. I wish I would like pulled stats as to how many like one more times that you picked over the couple of years.
Yeah, it was kind of a hard road because I was, I'm good friends with the judges now, obviously. But at first it was like, I'm kind of on an island and some of my calls were opposite. And then you're like, I need to stick true to myself, and judge the way I see it. I can't deviate from what I feel is right. And that was hard.
I'm super pumped to meet as many people as I possibly can this year, especially those that are smart enough to use FD Podcast at checkout, save themselves a couple of dollars on their FD tickets. Those are the people I really want to meet, mostly because I get a ton of high fives, a bunch of thank yous. A couple people tried to give me some money for it, but nope, didn't take it. But yeah, if you want to be one of those lucky few people to save some money, use FD Podcast at checkout, save a couple bucks, see you at the event. Yeah, it's like, I'm happy, and this is nothing against like any previous judges. I'm very happy that we're changing it up. Part of me almost wants us to like change judges like fairly regularly. I do like the idea of the rotation, which is good.
Yeah.
It's just like everybody, especially now on the judging panel, has a very different path to drifting and what they do and their eyes in it. Like, I still think Reese has some of the best eyes for drifting in the game. Like, watching some of his breakdowns, the way he discusses it, the way he sees drifting is so different than anybody else in that judging panel. And then obviously Vernon, arguably one of the most experienced judges ever. It's like him and Lontaine have watched more drifting than almost anybody. Yeah. Robbie comes from the Japanese style, and then Brian comes from just been in the sport at every level forever. So like, when people get really upset with judging calls, especially when those judging calls are unanimous and they're like, I don't get it, like all these judges, and it's like, you have so many different perspectives on it and they're all seeing and saying the same thing.
Right.
At what point are they not the issue? It's you're the issue, right?
Right.
And that's nothing against the fans. I think the hardest part as a fan is to make that same like gut feeling or that gut call without truly understanding what is different in the rule book, because this year is massive, like absolutely massive, as well as what was discussed in the drivers' meeting. Like that, those are two pieces of knowledge that most fans don't have, or what happened in practice, what was, explained to the spotters in practice. That's another part of it. Like, there's all of this other bits of information the fan base just doesn't have time for. We can't expect them to know what you and I know, right? Like that's damn near impossible. So I don't know. I don't know how we fix that. Like, how do we keep giving them more info? Because like, that's the other part too, is like, there's only so much time. There's only so much shit that I can say to like try and get them up to speed, and hopes that at that moment they're listening to what I'm talking about. They didn't just walk to go get, a bag of pork rinds from the kitchen and just miss the thing that I talked about, that like, this, we don't have, like, zeros basically don't exist anymore. They missed that part. Like, I don't get it. It should have been a zero. And it's like, well, no, if you would have listened, this is why.
Yeah. Like, how much drifting have I watched compared to a normal fan, right?
Right.
I mean, I've watched probably 90% of the laps in the last 5 years. That's bananas.
Right. That's not even just competition laps. That's practice laps.
That's practice laps. That's cars on track laps. So, so my perspective is obviously going to be different than a casual fan.
Yeah.
Like, I had a hard time, right? I had to remove myself. This is just being honest, right? I had to remove myself from Maximum Driftcast. I can't see that crap. I only give a shit about what the drivers think, right? So I would spend time, driving home from work on Monday, talking to drivers nonstop. I mean, the judging job never stopped. You're touching base with people. They're talking to you. You're talking to them, whatever. But there comes a point where you have to decide, like, look, I have one of the three decisions here and you don't. Therefore, your opinion doesn't matter. And that's it. I know that I'm doing the best that I can, and that's all I can do. And once I decided that, it was a lot easier. The last year was easier.
Yeah.
But damn, it's way more fun not being a judge now. Because I say this all the time, that's the worst job ever.
Yeah.
And I honestly think there's a component, if you want to be a judge, there's probably something wrong in your brain, because it's crazy.
I almost think that if you want to be a judge, you wouldn't make a good judge. Like, you almost don't want the job, right? Like that to me, almost like a politician. Like, the people who don't want to be in politics are probably the people who should be in politics.
Yeah, right.
If you want to be the president, there's a good chance there's an ulterior motive there and you're not qualified.
Exactly. Like, what do you want out of this? What are you getting at? I just want to help drifting. Like, whatever that may be. Like, I'm trying to run the show faster, because everybody just wants to watch drifting. So let's do that. Let's try to go as fast as we can. And I just love drifting.
Yeah. Well, you and I were it was funny before we started, you and I were chatting a little bit and I found out that you listened to my old show, which to me I was like, oh shit, that's like super cool. And it kind of just reminded me that like how much of a fan you are of the sport. Like that is so crucial to doing any of these jobs. And I think for anybody who most people don't understand just how much we're constantly trying to make the sport better. Like every car ride, every hangout at dinner, every time that the people within Formula Drift are together, the discussion at some point in time will go to, how do we make this better? How do we make the show better? How do we get the drivers to be better? How do we make judging better, announcing, whatever? That's all that people are discussing.
That conversation never stops.
No.
Never. Like I've been standing on a racetrack in Saudi Arabia talking about drifting, been in Japan talking about drifting. Like it never stops. It's whatever's best for Formula Drift. That's what I want to do. I want to figure out what that is. And I want to do that.
Yeah. Which makes it really difficult when you see people that come up and make those comments about like, oh, you guys like, oh, it's just because of this. Like, oh, it's just the sponsors and stuff. I'm like, dude, it's not. It's 100% not.
Yeah.
Like there's no ulterior motive. There's no script. There's no, okay, this guy has to win. Like it's the reason why drivers win is because they listen to the judges. They listen to the spotters. They understand how to win this game. That is why they win. That's it.
To that point, the guys that do well, they don't even say anything in the driver's meeting. They don't ask questions. They just listen and they leave and they go do what was asked of them. And they are successful. They
don't argue it. They go, this is what you want us to do. That's the thing I'm going to do.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. Drivers meetings are pretty intense sometimes. And, you don't, as a judge, you're like trying not to say the wrong thing. You get backed in a corner because that's how it feels.
Yeah.
They're trying to trap you and stuff. And, that kind of sucks. I don't like that. I don't like talking in front of people. And, for whatever, I wasn't able to talk that much, but,
it's like you're on trial and they're
100%.
trying to get you to slip up. Like I've seen it. I've seen where drivers or spotters have been like, okay, this thing, and I'm watching them and I'm like, they're building a case and then they're just going to try and pull the rug out from underneath you. And then they go, well, what about this thing? And then you're like, bro, you've had time to prepare for this.
Yes.
You built this case before bringing it here. You can't expect me to completely remember a scenario that happened a year ago at this track.
Yeah. And it's like very aggressive. Like, what if I get to the inner clip and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, well, who messed up there?
Yeah.
They already know that. I'm like, well, let's go with that. You already
and
know
those
the answer.
Scenarios like never happen either. They'll bring up some like crazy scenario and you're like, okay, then it'd be this. And then it doesn't happen, but something else that like no one has ever thought of happens.
Yes.
The
last few years have been that. It's just like, what? How did this happen? What? It's like you create a rule and then the thing happens that's outside of the wording of the rule. And you're like,
right.
Now we got to talk about this and try to figure this out in a timely manner, which is really hard.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you and I both very much, I mean, you and I've had discussions about it. I've had I would say argument is probably the best way to put it about some of the wording. And I'm like, look this is the way that I read this. And if I was a spotter or I was a driver, this is how I would do this thing. This is how I would get around this scenario. And what I think is really neat is how often a rule change will come up and how it's discussed within the entire staff. And it's like, what do you guys think about this? And then it's like, oh, it could be this, could be that. And like, same thing. It's almost like, here's the rule, try and poke holes in it. And before we implement it, just to make sure that this is going to stand.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And rules get pretty wordy sometimes. So it's like, all right, this is my interpretation of this paragraph, but I'm going to go ask the guy that wrote the paragraph and just make sure we're on the same page. Like, because that's happened before, more than once.
The intent or the spirit of the rule, it may be different than exactly how you could read it.
Right. Or how has it been enforced previously? Because if we've already made a call on a similar scenario, we can't do the opposite now.
Right.
We have to stay consistent.
Yeah.
So-
Which is super, super tough. But
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was the hardest part about qualifying, actually, is like you're going through and you're like, well, I this guy did that and I gave it a 6 in that sector or whatever. And this guy did slightly better or slightly worse. So you have to play that consistency game throughout qualifying, which is like 2 hours. And just, your brain is melted by the time you're done.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't drive to the freaking hotel after like judging. I'm like, my brain is mush. Like, I'm not doing it. I can't talk to you about it. We'll talk tomorrow because I can't do it right now. Because I gave it all.
Which is good. I mean, I think that's a good sign that you were that invested in the same way that, like, as much as, we talk about some of the fans getting like very aggressive about things, like part of me is also very happy that we have a fan base that's like that. If everybody was just like, yeah, whatever, like that would, I think would probably frustrate me more. I'm like, why don't you care more? But like, we have a very passionate fan base, for better or worse. Right. Sometimes it really sucks. But sometimes when like everybody's behind it and you can kind of like feel, like, especially a place like Atlanta or Irwindale, where you can feel the energy of the crowd. And how woo-woo that sounds, but like something's going on, the battle's nuts. People are just banging into each other the whole time and they're pushing through it. And you're like, you can just feel the whole crowd just, it's such a unique feeling.
It's wild. Like you're trying to make a decision, right? And it's like a close battle or whatever. And the crowd is like chanting one more time. And I think I had that in Atlanta one time. I had already inputted my decisions and like, the whole place is yelling at you. And it's like, it just gives you goosebumps because you're like, this is the coolest freaking thing ever. How did I get here? This is wild.
I'm sure there's times where like the battle was so good, you just want to do one more time just to see it.
Yeah.
Even though you're like, this guy had a massive correction, so he's not going to win, but like, I kind of want to see this happen again.
Yeah. And I'm pretty like, I'm really quiet until I'm forced not to be, or if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So if you watch a bunch of, mediocre runs for FD, which are incredible, and then you get the one banger and you're just like, yes, let's do that. Let's do that all night. Because that's why I'm here,
Yeah.
So, yeah. I don't know. It's so
just
fun to be a part of it.
Dude, it's great. It's so great, and it's so difficult to even complain about certain things because like there's just been days where I've been frustrated by things, or it's tough, or I'm tired, and then like something happens. I'm like, this is why I'm here. Like, this is it. Like, nothing else matters anymore. I don't care how tired or what's going on, and I'm just like, this is why I do it. This exact moment.
Yeah, I mean, most of us track staff guys have regular jobs, right? So I take off. It's like 32 days a year for FD, which is bonkers. And then there's lots of times where you're like, why am I doing this? Like, I have a son and a wife, and I'm giving up so much to do this, and it puts pressure on my work life. But every once in a while, you'll get the thing where you're like standing on the shelf at Atlanta, looking at the paddock, and you're like, damn, man, there's freaking semi trucks down there. Yeah. Like, there used to be open trailers back in the day, and now there's freaking semi trailers with Air Force on it, Rockstar. It's like, just to be a part of the growth of the sport, it's wild to watch. And nobody can ever take that away from me. It's my experience, I got to live that. Yeah.
It's wild. Speaking of your work, I want to know every mechanic that I meet, I always get into these questions. So can you give me one of the biggest horror stories of working on a car, whether it's like, somebody filling their dashboard full of leaves, or donks that you can't get the bolts off of? Like, what is the most ridiculous stuff you've run into over the years?
Particularly like bus communication with how all the modules interface. Okay. So like this, I had a Wrangler one time, the bus is down, so nothing works, car doesn't start, it's towed in. customer doesn't tell you anything, and you're like, what? Okay, there's like subs in the back, so I'm gonna go there first.
Yeah.
And you tear into it, and there's a freaking screw through one of the bus wires, and it's shorting the car out. But it, like, they won't even tell you that ever since I went to the stereo shop, my car doesn't start.
Yeah.
So it's like you're constantly battling what actually happened, what the customer told the service writer, what the service writer told you, and you're supposed to decipher all that kind of stuff. Trying to think of like another crazy one.
Like,
I have so many just communication fault stuff. I kind of like it. Like it, you get a car that's like been around different places, you know, took it here, took it there, told me to take it here, and then you get it and you figure it out. You're like, yeah, dude. Hell yeah. You know? So
yeah. Well, it's like kind of solving a mystery or like a murder mystery where you're like, okay, nobody else could get this sorted, but I got to figure it out. It's always the weirdest thing too.
Yeah. It's fun to get that stuff. And sometimes like straight up, you'll get your ass kicked, and you're like hours and hours into this thing that you can't figure out. And you just, I don't have any hair to lose, but you know, I would be losing my hair. And you know, it's, that sucks, but it's also super rewarding to fix crazy stuff.
I had recently, actually, I'll be driving it down to Florida if you want to see it. My Mazda Protege couldn't figure out
You're
why.
You're gonna drive it to Florida?
Yeah. It's
how
like
many miles is
hours.
that?
I don't know.
19
hours.
Holy shit.
It'd be a good road trip. I just got the AC done in it, so I'll be all right.
Hopefully it stays.
Yeah, I know. I couldn't figure out the math kept throwing like a over voltage signal, and I'm like, super weird. Put in a new math, did the exact same thing, and then it would just stop out of nowhere. But it would only happen as soon as I came into boost. Like it'd be fine, and then it would do it. So I moved the math around, did all this stuff, couldn't figure it out. Turns out I put a new hood on it. It was a reverse cowl hood, and when it would rain, it would drain it into the intake, go through the turbo and fill the intercooler full of water. So when I'd hit boost, the water would shoot and just like hit the MAF sensor just enough to do it. So I would literally like, until I moved, I eventually moved the intake, but I would have to like rev the shit out of it to blow the water out the blow off valve so I could drive the car.
That's funny.
It was like it's such a weird problem.
Right. I manual swapped my 2000 GS400. And since I did that, it has like this weird misfire. I can't use 6th gear. It was just like, I don't have time to like really work on it. And when I flew to Atlanta, I left the car with my buddy Lucas, and he pulled the injectors out and had them cleaned. And it's like, I've been fighting this problem for months, and he just did it without even telling me. And now the car's like perfect. And I'm like, God, why didn't I just do that to begin with? Because I did all the other things you could possibly do to fix these codes it was throwing. But
just happened to be that like in 6 at a certain load, the injectors couldn't handle it.
Yeah, like the manual tranny would load the engine probably in a manner that the auto never did or something.
Right.
So the car's good now. So
that's good. Well, at least I know who to call if the Mazda breaks down on the way down to Florida. So yeah, glutton for punishment on that one. That's,
right. For sure.
That is for sure. Yeah, it's super low on very old coilovers. It's gonna. I might need advice on my back when I'm done.
Yeah, that's a trek, dude. I don't know if I'd sign up for that.
Yeah. I can't get into why yet, but it's staying down in Florida for a little while. So like it needs to get down there at some point. So I was like, well, this makes the most sense. So I'm going to drop it off on Tuesday, I leave on Tuesday, and then I got to split it up. I'm this will come out. I'm going to be on the Circle of Drift podcast. So I get to be a guest for once.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I'm pretty excited. I don't know what it's going to be like to be on the other side of the interview, but
right.
Maybe I'll just start interviewing him out of habit.
Yeah, I mean, this is really the only interview I've ever done. So,
it's not too bad.
Mostly it's like, I just want to be in the background, you know? I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't dig too much on you. I mean, I did find out that you went to high school with Ryan Strybey from the MLB.
Oh yeah. He was in Little League with me when we were like 8 years old. Ryan
really?
Strebe. He was like
Strebe.
It was like, oh, we have to play that team. Like, oh god, he's so good. And
He was good back then too.
yeah. It was like, obviously, if you're going to the MLB as a grown up, you're gonna be insanely good at 8, right, or 10 or 11. So you're like a standout player, right? Yeah, that was funny.
Yeah, I was like looking through your high school to figure out like who the big like celebrities were, and then I found it. I think he was a year older than you, and I was like, shit. I'm like, that's it. That's all I got. So, here, your high school days were pretty lackluster. Although, I mean, it did look like you crushed pretty well at football for a while. So,
Yeah, I played for sure. Like I didn't play as like a kid. I mostly played baseball and then fell out of that for whatever reason. And then I played football for 3 years in high school. And, now I'm like a hardcore softball nerd. So it's fun. My dad, he plays like 16 over softball. And then, so him and his buddies, we started a team. It's all of the dads and all of the sons.
oh, cool.
So that's been super fun. But,
Yeah, it's kind of neat. And like, especially if your dad like, causes an error and then you gotta be like at the sidelines, like, what are you doing? We're gonna talk about this in the car. Like,
well, a couple of weeks ago, my dad was playing third and he like dove for a ball. And like the other team is like a bunch of young guys and they're like, oh, this guy's the GOAT, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like in left. I'm like, that's my dad.
that's my dad. I know him.
Yeah, that's been super fun.
That's funny. That's funny. Are you still running the SR and the drift car, or did you swap it?
Yeah, it's a S14 SR. I just had it rebuilt by Ray at Garage Auto Hero.
Okay.
And it was built previously, but it kept having head gasket issues and it blew like 3 head gaskets and at like 320 wheel, that shouldn't be a thing.
Yeah.
So I gave it to Ray. I'm like, this is broken and I don't know why, but you're going to find out. And they machined the bore too big for the pistons.
Oh.
Like they just did the math wrong. So then like the head gasket probably is undersized and whatever. So he rebuilt it. It took quite a while. He's a busy guy himself. And I got it back, got it tuned. I did some like different cams and a GTX Disco Potatoe, so like a 2860. Yeah. And it's rowdy now. It was like 340 or 350 wheel and 340 torque. Like it was spinning the tires on the dyno. It was rad.
That's sick.
You had to keep dumping pressure out of it because the turbo just whacks so hard.
Yeah.
And I finally drove it yesterday down at Spirit Peaks. It was pretty wet most of the time, but I got like 6 or 7 laps in the dry and it was freaking rad.
Nice.
It's like a CD09 tranny, so the gearing's kind of off. Mm-hmm. So, but you have it in third and you just let it eat and she's loaded up and it sounded really good. It was fast.
Do you know the story behind the term Disco Potato?
Mm-mm.
I don't know if this is true. I was told there was a legendary drift car that was both brown and like very like a ton of fleck in the paint. And the guy had the same like this turbo on, and the car was nicknamed the Disco Potato because it was brown and reflective. And then because of that, the turbo somehow inherited it. Once again, don't know. That's the story I've been told.
That seems legit. That's like a forum story, right? Mm-hmm. So.
That's where I heard it too. Believe it or not, in the old Mazda Protege forums, because a lot of guys would throw that turbo on the Proteges, blow their transmission to smithereens. But like that was like, I was like, oh, I threw a Disco Potato on it. It was like a absolutely great nickname. Absolutely great nickname.
I probably could put a bigger turbo on it just to make it more drivable because it's like a light switch. So, but it's pretty rowdy little grassroots car. It's super fun.
Nice. Yeah, I still would love to have like some sort of staff drift day. I think
it'd be so
cool.
Please.
It'd be ridiculous though.
Yeah.
Oh no.
2-year-old's mad.
Oh dude, it's all good. Like I said, I'm more shocked my 11-year-old isn't, yelling and crying.
That's big crying.
That is big crying. That's definitely big crying. But nah, it's all good. It's the balancing of the dad life and everything else, especially like you said with the drifting and traveling is not an easy one.
Yeah, it's so hard to, get things done, like work on the drift car, and there's just no time for anything. My calendar is wrecked. It's like, hey, you want to do it? I'm like, no, I can't do that. What about this? Nope.
we have a giant calendar in our bedroom that's like the entire year in one shot, and it's called the "No, we can't go" calendar. Yeah, because same thing. Just I think I'm 140 days gone this year.
Jeez.
Yeah. Thankfully, I'm not a mechanic, and I can kind of work from anywhere, or else I'd be basically poor.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm fortunate enough. I've worked at the dealership for 20 years at the end of the summer, like right out of high school.
Yeah.
So the industry is kind of in a place where there's just not that many technicians that are, highly skilled and certified and la-di-da. So I kind of just, I'm like, here's my schedule. And, they can't, the industry did it to themselves, right? But they can't really say no. Yeah. And I've been doing it for 9 years now. So there's also that.
Yeah. It's like, I'm sure you don't get many other days off, but if you've got the seniority, right? That's the biggest thing. 20 years is like, even if you're at the same dealership for 9-10 years, like, that's pretty good seniority.
Yeah. I try not to be a dick about it. I try to make sure I don't leave any work like half completed or anything like that. I try to not make it more of a headache than it needs to be.
Yeah. You don't want to, you don't have to like hand off your station or whatever project you're on.
Yeah. I just don't want to piss anybody off, which, I probably do anyways, but
it happens. If you're not pissing people off, you're not doing it right.
Right. Yeah.
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 But do you have anything else scheduled out this year? Or just FD stuff?
No, it's just FD stuff. I had a couple offers. Like I could have judged that Iron Drift King in Germany. That would have been pretty rad.
You still could. Reese and I are going.
It's back-to-back weekends, so it's like, I know. And
because I think it's after Utah, right?
Something like that.
Yeah.
I was looking at him like, I could have judged like a full season in Japan. I can't do that. This whole job thing is really holding me back, but
right.
It is what it is.
It's got to make you internet famous or like a TikTok star, and then you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. I'd love to, I want to be in a position to where, we get the wife's business going and I'm not debt laden, and then I can make, different decisions from there. But
can I ask what she does?
So she's a barista. So
sick.
We're in Seattle. So that's like, coffee world, right? So she manages a bunch of locations now, but we want to, branch out and do her own thing. So
her and I can chat coffee for days, as you probably already know.
Right. Yeah.
Now I definitely want to meet her. I want to chat the coffee industry. I've just been on the other side. I've never really worked in the industry. Just very much a high level consumer of a lot of caffeine.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always have it.
Yeah.
Right? We have our own machines, all that, whatever. But.
Yeah. It's like the one thing I'm most excited about doing in Seattle. I'm hoping, I think Iron Drift King is after Seattle, now that I think about it, because I'm supposed to do a different podcast while I'm in town, but I've got a couple of days off that I'm just going to take. So I might have to go do a coffee tour of Seattle.
Nice.
Yeah. I'll definitely be hitting you up for recommendations and locations.
Right. I'll just relay that to her because I don't know.
That's good. I'm sure the Seattle stop is nice for you, just not having to travel as far.
Yeah, it's nice to not get on a plane, it's like 20 flights a year or something, which isn't a lot for some, but a ton for others.
Yeah.
Which I hate planes. But
really?
Necessary. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. Like, I don't know. I just don't like it. It's like, it's such a time suck.
Yeah.
And, people are terrible. Airports bring out the worst in humans.
Yeah.
And it's just not a great experience, Smokes an entire day.
It's amazing how you do nothing, but you're still somehow tired.
Yeah. all I did was sit down for 6 hours and I'm wrecked when I get
exhausted.
home.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't make any sense.
I don't know. I think it's just like the heightened level of stress constantly and just dealing with people and like the patience that you have to have.
Yeah.
Especially as somebody who travels frequently, like it does get, oh, it sounds so terrible, but it does get frustrating when you are around people who clearly don't travel a lot.
Yes.
And they're making very silly mistakes. And you're like, have you done no research? Have you not read anything about how to do this thing? Like, it's
Right.
not hard. Like you just can't do that. You can't put that size bag through the machine. They're not going to allow you to bring that as a carry-on.
Right.
They've already told you there's no more carry-ons. Why are you trying to find a space? Like,
Yep.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something about it like makes people like frantic or like on edge. So then this thing happens and then you're yelling at the TSA person and you're like, relax. Like,
Just people trying to get on the plane. And it's like, listen, you're standing in line.
Yeah.
They're not going to leave.
yeah.
You're going to make it on. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
You
And
know?
like, we're like group B all the time because we travel so much. And then like, you know, everybody lines up and crowded and they're like all in D. And you're like, excuse me, I need to get on the plane.
Yeah. It's I did do a work visa interview like 2 weeks ago, and they were like very clear, like everywhere it was posted, like no electronics, nothing electronic. And I watched the guy like get into a big argument. He's like, yeah, but it's just my phone. And the guy's like, what don't you understand? Like no electronics. Like they were checking watches to make sure like your smartwatch and stuff. Like they're like nothing, no headphones, no electronics. Very simple. You're going into a secure government building, no electronics. And the amount of people, 20-30% of people in line, it's just wild. It's like, it's not hard. Just listen. That's it. You're dealing with a federal governing body. They have very strict rules. Just follow them, and no one's going to get mad at you. That's it.
Yeah. People are just too wrapped up. They don't have time to even read the thing. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So then they show up and like, it's more stressful than it needs to be. And I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. What a point of privilege to be able to just even complain about that. But
I know, right?
Yeah.
It's
Like I
first
like
world
sit back
problems.
and I'm like, yeah, this is what I'm mad about, that like people don't understand what baggage weight limits are. Like,
Right.
oh man. Oh.
Right.
So this episode's coming out before Orlando. I've been trying to keep up on the background to like keep the tracks. So shouts out to Style Driven for supplying those.
Nice.
Thoughts on Orlando? I know it's very divisive. I do like the battles that happen there because I think it track wise does present some of the best opportunity for like door to door. The facility is in need of repair.
Yes.
What are your general thoughts on it?
I'm excited to see some good tandem because I don't think we've seen very much thus far.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually disappointed in Atlanta after going back and watching it. So I want to see some good driving. Last year they did like a giant patch on bank exit, and they so we show up the day of qualifying, right? And they're like, yeah, we're gonna repair the racetrack, and we're like, we're go hot in like 4 hours. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And they cut out like a 20x10 section of that track and repaved it. And it's way better now. Way better. So that transition from the bank to the infield's like way smoother and gradual. So that made it a lot
blowing
better.
tie rods like crazy. Guys were just bending tie rods coming off the bank.
Yeah, they'd smack the diffs on the ground and stuff. So that improved the track a lot. I wish it wasn't so abrasive so we could do some other layouts, but the quality of the pavement's just so abrasive.
Yeah, it's
Tires
pretty worn
just
down.
don't make it.
I was excited when they had they were announcing the layout change, mostly because the drivers were all just panicking.
Yeah, right.
It's good to like kind of see them off their game a little.
Yeah.
I do kind of hope they go back to it. We fixed that spot, so
Well, I think it was supposed to be paved or something, and then I don't know, it didn't happen or whatever. But I think I like new layouts because it kind of evens the field. Nobody has data then. Nobody has their spring rate and their gear and blah blah blah. So then it just changes the the weekend completely. You know,
I do.
what-
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think it was, I want to say it was Chelsea I was having the conversation with. We were talking about like, how do you improve the sport? And we were talking about Orlando, and there was like him and I were kind of like back and forth discussing like if that layout would have improved it or not. And then we kind of got into like the tire discussion. I do think that if we had longer runs, it would improve it because you wouldn't be able to grip the car up as much. Like if you had to do an extra turn in Orlando, like let's say you finish that inner, like the outer two, I guess, and then you had to do another outer at the lower section of that bank, you know, the initial one, if that makes sense. Like if you were to, you know, let's see if I can figure out how to point, and then you come back around and then have to go back.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
If we added another turn, you have to pull grip out of your car.
Right. Well, and the issue with that, so you free the car up a lot, and then you're probably going to end up with higher wheel speed, which is going to kill your tires even worse. So, you know, like back in the day with qualifying, back in the day, a year ago,
Back in the day, last year.
qualifying, the cars were a lot freer, but they would kill their tires in one lap, you know?
Right.
So I think we got to do something tire wise. It pains me to say that because you want to be like the pinnacle and like the craziest thing you could see, you know, drifting wise and be on the mountaintop. But I think the tires are hurting our overall product as an entertainment, right?
My thought would be like, don't change it, leave it where it's at, and let everybody work around that. Like we always see this where there's some sort of progression or change, and then everybody catches up and figures out how to make a better car around that product. So why not put a moratorium on it or a pause, or whatever you want to call it, for the next 5 years? We do not change tire regulations like size or anything else. Let everybody catch up and see where we are in a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That way we're not going backwards, because that's, and once again, like this was a discussion with Chelsea over the weekend, like just let everybody catch up and get the data through, and we just leave it like that and see where we're at. Because going backwards seems wrong. We are the pinnacle.
Yeah.
Going backwards doesn't seem right to me.
Yeah, I get that perspective, but I want to see. I think I said this in a driver's meeting one time. I was all fired up about something, but what we're doing now is so far from what we all started and why we fell in love with drifting.
Right.
Because the cars are so knife edge that the tandem isn't as good. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to come off like the drivers are bad or something like that. It's just, they're so freaking gripped up that one mistake here ruins the lap. And it makes the driving twitchy. It's not smooth. Like drifting is so aesthetically pleasing. Like if you're in Seattle, right? And you're watching them come around the big bank and they're lined up and it's just a wall of smoke and it just looks incredible. And they go through the infield and they transition at the same time. And you're like, this is amazing. I want to see this all the time. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, myself, we don't get to see that as much.
Yeah, it's fair.
So, and maybe I'm wrong about the tire thing, or maybe it's something else, but like, I don't know.
I don't know what the answer is. I really don't. Like, there's so many different ways that this could be tackled. I'm also curious, like how many times has this discussion happened where like 5 years ago, is it the same discussion? Like the cars are too gripped up, we can't do more. 5 years before that, the cars like, and then technology changes, building changes, drivers get better. And then the driving gets good again, we make a change. And that's the part. Like, has this always been the discussion since day one?
Right. I mean, like quick changes and dog boxes and all these, we break that stuff. Mm-hmm. That's great. Have you seen like the shaft in a freaking dog box? It's huge.
Yeah.
And they shear these things off. Not all the time, but it happens.
But enough. Yeah.
And it's like, geez, these tires are huge. Mm-hmm. I mean, you look at half the tires and you're like, I can't even fit that on my car. There's no way. I'd freaking clutch kick and everything would explode.
Yeah.
So the cars are so stout and so rowdy and expensive.
Mhm.
But it's like the argument of like, well, we'll go full spec and then everybody's in the same car and it's all about a driver. And then, but that's probably too much of a departure from what drifting is, you know?
Right.
It's always, drifting's always been open and different chassis and this and that, and, you know?
I still would love to see a spec series for multiple reasons, because I do think it would be cool, but I don't think it should replace what we have now. I think it's something that could run in parallel. Whether pro spec becomes a true spec series, that makes it a little bit harder to transition up to pro. I don't know if we're at a point where the industry could support a complete spec series. You would need a manufacturer to come in and fund the majority of it. And
I think the true spec would be hard, but it's really cool what's happening, you know, outside of FD with these other competitions, like a 235 class at Englishtown, I think, and like the LZ stuff. Like, that's cool.
Chelsea Denofa beat Tommy Lemaire. Like,
that's cool.
300 horsepower. I mean, it's probably a little more like closer to 4, but his turbo is dying against 900,000 horsepower Tommy Lemaire in a pro level car, and Chelsea doored him the whole way around. Like,
and Tommy shreds. He's like no slouch at all.
Oh yeah, no, he's arguably the best driver in Canada right now. So for sure. That's just wild to me, and that's because of a complete spec set of tires.
Right. Yeah, because they run. Everybody's on the same tire, right?
They're all in those accelerators. Yeah.
It's the same size
651.
too.
Yep.
That's cool.
Yeah.
But there's a place for that, right? And it's not different or less than or greater or whatever, but it's another thing that's like equally cool, right?
Well, and the layout of the track also allows for that. Like that layout
for sure
maybe wasn't the most exciting. They could have run the DMCC layout where it's basically like a drag race down the front, big initiation close to a wall, and then you kind of loop around.
Right.
In that case, Tommy would have just decimated everybody. There's nobody could keep up. But the way they ran that layout, there was multiple transitions, there was outers, there was inners, like there was a lot going on. So if you did start to get gapped, you made a large mistake, you could just kind of skip an entire section to get back on, right? Like that whole show is meant to be a show. It is all that it is meant for is tandem. That's it. How much tandem can we make? Which arguably is more exciting than, you know, how much can we gap people?
Yeah, for sure. Nobody wants to see that, right?
No.
Like, you know, the cars are insanely fast and we're on insanely fast racetracks, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, it's a completely different thing, but it's just as fun to watch that, you know, the highest horsepower, highest grip, highest speed drifting versus like a slower track where dudes are just as good. They're just doing a different style of the track, right?
It's needed. It's needed in so many levels. I know I've said it before, but like if you didn't have the high level FD, we would never have progression in angle kits, suspension, differentials, like gearboxes. Like you wouldn't, if it wasn't for FD, you wouldn't see guys with full blown angle kits and grassroots right now.
Right.
You wouldn't see, you know, quick changes at the prices that they're at, or dog boxes at the prices they're at, right?
Yeah.
Like, not that they're cheap, but there was a while where you had to basically get parts from NASCAR. Like that was the thing. You had a NASCAR V8, right? Like I remember when that was the thing. It was if you had a NASCAR V8, that was it. And now we're looking at guys developing stuff that's so far out of any other motorsport, right?
Yeah.
What Steph's doing with the B58 engine, like that progression of that engine may or may not trickle down to grassroots, but the fact that it might is exciting, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, one of the aspects I do for Formula Drift with Trey and Kevin is tech inspection at the beginning of the season, right? So you get to see every car, and it's over the years, it's super fun. Like, you know, some of these cars are built in a garage by one guy, and then some cars are built by a team of dudes in a shop that's worth a gajillion dollars, right?
Yeah.
And to see the differences in the car, and sometimes the differences in the car in like build quality per se doesn't really translate to results on the racetrack.
Right.
Like I'll call out Tommy here, but that car is been around the block. She's beat, and he slays in that thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's cool. Where else are you going to see that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sitting through a lot of the tech inspections, it was pretty eye opening to see the differences between, something like, chassis that's been around the block that's been beaten up. And then you get something like Stuckey's car coming in that like is just incredible. Like just everything is so perfect on that car. And you're like, that's like basically just Casey Cole building the whole thing.
Right. Yeah. No, that car is gorgeous. I think that was my favorite car at Long Beach for going through tech.
Dude.
And he runs on a smaller tire, which is cool. And he does well. Like, I think, was it his first year or second year in? And he's running the Pro Spec tire and he's winning battles. And, that's not supposed to happen, but he's doing it. And that was one of my favorite things to follow that year, I actually made a point. I was like, I think Sage was announcing, I'm like, he's on a small tire. Say that. Tell everybody. Everybody needs to know.
Yeah, or Robert Thorne's the other one. Like, that thing had a stock gas tank from Mount Rad, and he was beating people. And you're like, this, by our general understanding of what should and shouldn't win, this shouldn't win. And yet, it was.
He had a T56 tranny, I think.
Yep.
And it was, he still had a brake booster, stock brake booster, which that's super rare in drifting and pro drifting now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, stock gas tank, all this stuff. And he's beating. And I'm like, everybody should know, like, this car wins. Like, it's essentially, especially in pro spec, like the simple cars do better. They don't break as often. Pro spec is, just as much about attrition as it is, winning battles straight up.
Yeah.
These cars are built in garages by dudes, and maybe they're not professionals, but they're doing what they can and they're trying to live that dream, right? And you got to respect that. But I think the idea of spending more money doesn't always get you the win, which I think is really cool and kind of unique to drifting.
Mm-hmm. So. All right. There's a couple things I want to touch on before we wrap up. One, you were front and center for one of the most infamous situations in FD history, which is Chris Stops on the jack stands. What was that like? Because that was wild. You were right there.
Yeah. So like in the video, I'm the guy that stops him, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like hands up and I'm like, please stop. Because Chris Stops is terrifying.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
He's actually a teddy bear, but he's freaking terrifying. So, I'm like, is he going to stop? Is he going to stop? And he stopped. I'm like, okay. Because Kevin's like on the radio in my headset telling him he's not going. He didn't make it. But he's trying to pull to the line anyway. So, yeah, that was like my 5 seconds of fame right there.
That was a wild night. I think I was there that night. I have to remember.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was.
Because you worked with Riley, right?
Yeah, I think that was 2018. Yeah. I was with Riley at that point.
Yeah, so. I miss his aggression and his driving.
Same. I got to see him a couple of days ago. Actually, Envy did the alignment on the Protege before it came down, and him and I were kind of chatting about all the golden days kind of thing. So
yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if you see him come back. There's a lot of discussions around it, but yeah, it's funny because he's such a calm, mild-mannered, very quiet, to himself person, and then you put him behind the wheel, and it's just it's a completely different human being.
Yeah,
just even his in-car. Dude, I used to like love watching his in-car of him just like smacking his helmet and like screaming, just like mid-drift. You could hear it over the engine, him screaming at other drivers to like hurry the hell up. He's like, "What are you doing? What are you doing?" And he's just like on them through the keyhole. Dude, and then you get out of the car and you're like, "How's it going?" He's like, "I think it was a pretty good run." And I'm like, "Yeah, I think so too, dude."
That's awesome.
How many times have you been mistaken as Jason Statham?
So I think Robbie started that.
Yeah.
And particularly when I was in Japan and I judged that one round, and he's like telling everybody that, and everybody's like, oh yeah, like, you know, Kazama's, yeah. I'm like, yeah, man, I'm a bald white guy. Like, what do you want?
It is uncanny though. I mean, it is pretty uncanny how close.
I mean, I just need to hit the weight room, I guess, and I'll get there.
Yeah. Just work on the accent a little bit, and then weight room, and you're pretty much good. So.
I mean, I did have a black BMW like 540i for a while, so
there you go. Could be the transporter.
Yeah,
could be. Cool. Yeah, I think that's about it. I mean, I did find out your high school nickname, which is Crit, which I love, and I might start calling you that from now on.
Yeah, that's what I put on my softball jersey, actually. So,
Crit.
Yeah.
Sick.
Yeah, my buddy
story?
Tom
just a good
started
nickname.
calling me that. I don't know.
Yeah.
We used to listen to a lot of rap music with my buddy Tom Tavachinsky. We drive team tandem and stuff, and you know, there was a period in our lives where we helped each other out a lot. And, you know, he's one of my best friends. So one of those dudes that would give you the shirt off his back. So. And
a pretty good nickname, it seems.
And a good nickname.
Cool, man. Well, I'm glad we finally got to do this. It's funny, man. within the staff, it was you and Andy Luck are like the two most requested people to get on. Like when we were talking about like different staff members to get on, everybody wants Andy on. I don't know if I'm prepared. I don't know if the internet's prepared.
Yeah, I don't know. You might have to have a couple beers or something for that one.
I think that's going to be the way I close out this season, just because that way there's time to like let it all digest. Like we wrap the season on Andy Luck. I don't know like how you follow that one up.
Yeah, I mean, he's got so much dirt on like everyone that.
Dude.
Yeah, I love that guy though.
I don't even know how I approached that episode. Like I just don't.
Well, it's like me. The FD staff, like the core staff, they've been around forever, right?
Yeah.
And they'll tell you stories from the early days about like rowdy parties and like traveling all over the world, and you're like, I'm upset I missed that. Yeah. But also probably good I wasn't there, you know? So.
Yeah, I'm very much of the same attitude. I'm not a big partier. I'm not like I'm believe it or not, like when I'm not being paid to be social, I'm pretty quiet at home. Like I don't leave the house. So like I hear those stories and I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty okay that I missed that. Like that's cool. And please keep telling me all these stories, but I would not have been the person trying to like diffuse the cops and SWAT teams and stuff. Like I definitely would have been the guy in the hotel room going like, please, no one bug me. Like,
please go to sleep.
Yeah. Can we all calm down, please? Sick. Well, yeah, dude, thanks again. I do appreciate you making time. We were kind of back and forth. I'm hoping your back's doing all right. And I think standing up worked out well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. For anybody listening or watching at home, thank you for all the support. I'll leave Chris's. Do you want people to follow you? Do you want to like be secret? I know are you good now that you're not a judge?
Yeah. I mean, it's probably better now. That's fine. Cool. Whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. The only thing you can get mad at now is if the pacing of the event isn't fast enough. That's it.
Right.
Yeah. Which, I mean, you've done a phenomenal job with. We're getting through it. Like nothing. Pat did a great job, but I do think you've brought a different take on how to get through the show, which is kind of neat.
Right.
So, yeah, I'll leave your socials down below. Right. People can go stalk you there.
Thanks for having me on, sir. Appreciate it.
Dude, I'll see you in a couple days. I'm happy to have you on and keep having the nerd situations and talks.
Yeah.
And, yeah, I don't know if we're sharing a car anytime soon, but those are where the best conversations happen.
Yeah.
It'll happen. Sick. Well, thanks everybody for listening and watching. Yeah, after this episode, we're going to keep doing the post-podium interviews with the drivers. That did really well. People seem to like it. So stay tuned for that. That'll be the episode that comes out after Orlando, probably Sunday morning, which means we won't do the Wednesday episode, so you don't have to DM me wondering where the episode is. Thank you for reminding me for everybody. But yeah, and then we'll be back to our regularly scheduled program after that. So sick.